But you see these students and just the excitement and the skills that they're bringing to this, across 120 trades that they're competing in while they're down here. It's just amazing to see their excitement. In some cases, it's their first time traveling, right, to a place like Atlanta, and it's just like you can just feel the buzz of these 6,000 students who are, about to compete, probably nervous, but also incredibly excited and passionate about what they're doing. So we love being here for this.
And this is the future of the trades. All right, we are here at SkillsUSA in Atlanta. I'm super excited because I have somebody who is passionate about the trades. His name is Mark Hedstrom of the Skilled Trades or the Skilled Careers Coalition. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me on, Andrew. Appreciate it.
So what's your feeling about being here? And this is the future of the trades, the kids walking around. What's your feeling on that, these kids?
It's amazing to see. I mean, you always have this generational conversation about, oh, the kids coming up behind us or the students coming behind us. I was a Gen Xer, so I was considered a slacker. But you see these students and just the excitement and the skills that they're bringing to this, across 120 trades that they're competing in while they're down here. It's just amazing to see their excitement. In some cases, it's their first time traveling, right, to a place like Atlanta, and it's just like you can just feel the buzz of these 6,000 students who are, about to compete, and probably nervous, but also incredibly excited and passionate about what they're doing. So we love being here for this.
And I remember being here last year and walking around and just being blown away and just looking at the coats and the red coats that they're in.
Sure.
And it's just, when you go by plumbing, you go by welding. And I remember going by sort of the welding competition, and I saw what they made with their hands. Like someone made an owl, someone made a ship. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, these kids have such talent. And I always tell companies who are looking to hire the best, come here. Oh yeah, this is the future.
No, these students are, so the way it works for your audience is, SkillsUSA is about a 450,000 student member organization. There's a bunch of advisors, CTE advisors and teachers, administrators. So it's a fairly large organization, and you've got 450,000 students that are part of this, and that's in the larger ecosystem of those that are going through career technical education. And this is the best of the best. And I think that the opportunity, though, even at the national competition, if you go back to each of the states and you go back to the regional competitions, there's a ton of students out there in this ecosystem that are competing, and they have amazing skills. So a lot of these students who are walking this floor, or they're back at state walking the floor and competing, like those are hireable people tomorrow. And I think the thing that people don't know about SkillsUSA is it's not just the hard skills they're teaching, because that's the advisor's role. You've got some great mentors out there teaching their trade.
Soft skills.
But it's all the soft skills. You talk to, any type of employer out there right now, and, soft skills, how to be part of a team, how to show up to work on time, are you potential management track for the organization? Like all that stuff is being taught by SkillsUSA.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And, it's interesting when somebody is in the field, right? And they want to make the leap to entrepreneurship, you need the soft skills. Or let's say that you're walking, and I was having this conversation with Paige Knowles, plumber Paige, who's a part of Skills Jam. We'll get into that. And I remember she was on the podcast, and she was like, I remember walking up to a home, knocking on the door, and the husband answers. He's looking at me like, "You're going to fix my plumbing?" She's like, "Yeah." And he felt like, I should be able to do that. But she did that. And there's people like that who are just amazing and working with their hands and putting, obviously, their stuff out there. She has a couple books and things like that. But man.
Yeah, it's, from her to some of the other G ambassadors work, we can talk about that as well as we get into the conversation, but all the way through to these students. I mean, there's a need for both those hard skills, swinging the hammer, and the soft skills that they have to bring to this this trade. And you would say the same in, what we're traditionally called white collar jobs. Like you want people who show up, you want people who are part of a team, you want someone who can potentially be a manager. And to your point, like if you decide, let's say you're a carpenter and you work for someone for a number of years, maybe that person's retiring. Is that an opportunity for you to take over the business, or can you take your skills and start your own business? And you've got to have those soft skills. You've got to know how to manage people. You've got to know how to manage the books. And that's the kind of stuff that they're learning at SkillsUSA and, throughout their careers when they're students.
Yeah, and it's about the passion of SkillsUSA. I remember walking in a technical school in Paramus, New Jersey. I had spoken there with somebody else. And I remember going through the carpentry section. and Skills USA flag was hanging there, like somebody won. And I spoke to the head person there, and he just lit up. He's like, yeah, that's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And it is. And when you say Skills USA, people really resonate. If you're in the trades world, people resonate like, yeah, that's the place where like you learn your soft skills, you compete, and you get so much experience from that.
Yeah, and you see that all the way through the advisors to the educators to the students, all the way up through the leadership of the organization is just this sort of passion for really empowering these young students around not just the hard skills, but those soft skills and being incredibly well-rounded. So you'll see it on the floor. I'm sure you saw it last year. I've seen it for the last couple of years. Just the excitement that these kids bring to the conversation and what they're trying to do in the world.
Yeah. It's interesting. Everybody's got a journey and a story. My backstory is I was a high-tech guy. And on 9/11/2001, I found myself on ground zero helping first responders, EMS, firefighters, and working back-to-back with tradespeople. That changed everything for me. And I literally quit a job in IT, formed a tool and equipment company named Toolfetch, and started giving back to people in the trades. What's your backstory on this? Like why the trades?
I've got an interesting journey. I mean, look, I started out, grew up in Central Mass. So, we'd already talked about being from outside of Worcester. Look, I don't have the accent, but I can do it. I grew up working on a farm. I was a farmhand all through high school and college. And, I didn't have one of those internships that you would get when you're going through a 4-year degree. My parents were like, no, you're going to learn what it's like to make a buck. Learn to work with your hands. And you play that all the way through. I spent time in public policy, health policy. I was a former management consultant. I worked in action sports. So I ran a snowboard skateboard company. I worked at Oakley. I think through all that, it doesn't seem like there's a through line, but the through line was, always continuing to be intellectually curious about like what comes next and continuing to build my own skill set, right? Whether it be my soft skill or my hard skills and sort of those types of jobs. All the way through to, I got to a point in my career where I was trying to figure out a way to give back. And so I moved into philanthropy. So I was the head of the Movember Foundation in the U.S. for about 11 years. So I was the guy getting men to grow mustaches every November. So literally I was a farmer growing up, vegetable farming to then a mustache farmer about 30 years later. So that's the kind of joke and through line. But what I found in philanthropy was the ability to kind of leverage my experience and skills to give back, right? So I moved from creating products or helping people create products to actually creating a social good product. And I spent 11 years doing that, focusing a lot on men's health. And then I came across this and, really the opportunity here is not dissimilar to what I was doing in November. It's just a different look at the same issue, which is how do we empower and raise that next generation of talent? And how do we get them to places and spaces where they feel like they can have fulfillment? The conversation I was having growing up was always like, oh, it's a 4-year degree or it's the military. And what you see now is this conversation that's starting to happen. It's like, wait a minute, we've hollowed out this opportunity for these young students to not consider a skill career, right? They were dirty, dark, dangerous jobs when I was growing up. They were blue collar jobs when I was growing up. And it doesn't have to look that way. It's not that way. In terms
was
of
shop class in your high school?
No, I actually know a guy who's, I live out in Los Angeles. He runs a masonry company, great, top of the line guy. He went to the local tech school back in Fitchburg, Mass. And I knew those kids, right? I went to the local high school. I went to an all-boys school. That was always like the tradies versus, the regular high school kid. And there was this real dichotomy that quite frankly, it was just, I worked with a bunch of those guys on the farm and like, they're solid dudes and they knew exactly what they were doing and they knew their career path. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know what I want to do.
Most kids don't.
Yeah, most kids don't. I mean, but they knew exactly what they're doing because they had a trade. They had picked up they picked up a hammer, they picked up something when they were, 14, 15 and just started working. And that I reflect on that now and realize kind of how it's gone full circle on that. And, just being able to be in a space where you can empower young students to think about what's possible and give them more opportunity, I think is probably the most important piece.
Yeah. And it's a trade that it's a skill that's always in demand, right? It doesn't matter if you're an electrician and you're union, like you can go pretty much anywhere, right? If you're a welder, there's always, look, we need over 300,000 welders by 2029, according to welding workforce data, right? We need 80,000 electricians every single year up to 2030. And that's just to replace the electricians that are leaving the industry. That's
right.
BLS, right? 550,000 plumbers are needed, over 600,000 open manufacturing jobs. And you look at those numbers, you're like, holy cow, like the opportunities to learn a trade. And it's interesting. And I'd like to hear your thought on this because I hear the comments on TikTok. I have a sizable TikTok following. And the thing is, the comments that come back and forth is the pushback from the younger generation is that they kind of look at two different paths. They look at maybe a trades path, maybe a college path. Then some of them also push back and say, why would I want to be an apprentice? I only make $16 an hour. But if I work for McDonald's or Chipotle, I can make $22 an hour. What would you push back to the younger generation on that?
Well, less about, and look, I won't say how old I am, but I did identify as a Gen Xer, so you can kind of do the math from there. But I think what I've learned over time is, the ability to grow your, whether it's compensation or career in a service industry job is going to be much more challenging than having that opportunity as an apprentice. Coming out, yes, are you making, $25 an hour? No. But are you on a pathway that's going to move from, apprenticeship to journeyman to master over a 25, 30-year horizon where your compensation, your income becomes that much bigger? Then, it's a longer term play in terms of how you're looking at that. So I would always consider, where I started, working as a farmhand, I think I made $8 an hour. I don't know, maybe when I was 14, because you could work at 14 on a farm. I think it was $8 an hour. But I think by the time I left, I probably made $14 an hour. I mean, at 18, 19, I'm like, this is great. But the reality was, like, I didn't have to pay for rent. I didn't have to do all this other stuff. And the reality is, so I think that opportunity with a skilled career is, really seeing, yes, you have to start out, you have to pay your dues, but those dues pay off in the end.
Yeah. And the thing is, and for McDonald's, like, you're not, most likely it's a lower percentage that you're going to be upper management, right? You're probably, your wages will stay the same. But like you said, if let's just say you're in a union, there are wages that you're going to make. Like every 6 months or a year, you're making a little bit more. And I always say, like, if you want to be a journeyman, be a journeyman. That's cool. You want to be a master in your trade? Go do it. You want to be an entrepreneur? Do it. You want to run a construction company? It depends how far you want to take it. It's what you put in is what you get out.
Sure. Yeah. And this, I mean, in general, most of those that have done well in this country are entrepreneurs or people who start their own businesses, right? So the ability to learn to trade, the ability to learn under someone who's been in the trade for 30 years and get mentorship, which is a big focus for us, and then have the opportunity to either stay with that organization and grow within the organization, or to take your talents and create your own opportunity. A lot of those people who are doing well in this country are those that have started their own business.
It's hard though.
Oh no, 100%. Let's be clear. There's a lot of businesses that fail more than they make it, for sure.
Entrepreneurship is crazy. If you start a business,
you know it.
Yeah. I know it. I started a business at 23. Like and it's fulfilling, but it's difficult. It's scary. You go through all the emotions, but it's a whole different skill set. And obviously you need to get around other people, have a certain mindset, business groups, masterminds to be successful. But I like the fact that you could just take your skill anywhere. And it's such in high demand. Even with AI, I mean, let's just talk about AI for a quick second. It's disrupting white collar jobs across the board. Everybody's afraid. My friends are afraid who have white collar jobs. Like, why do they need me anymore? But if you're in a trade and you're working with your hands, AI is not coming to disrupt anytime soon. The Optimus robots from Elon Musk are not going to walk around and, go onto your crawl space anytime soon, which I don't think. But what are you seeing from a perspective of AI versus?
In terms of what's out there, there's going to be a disruption of about 40% of the jobs, mostly white collar jobs, from the reports and studies that we've taken a look at and those that have been published recently. There's always going to be disruption. I think the challenge we see now, and where there's insulation for a skilled career, a skilled trade, is disruption's happening at a lot quicker pace, right, than it used to. Like, technology is moving us forward faster. Whereas, moving from horse-drawn buggy to the Model T, right, and how long that took to then get to mass production of cars where it could end up in everyone's driveway. That was a long period of time. Now we're having disruption in 10-year cycles, right? So job creation and job destruction is becoming a real challenge. I think one of the things that's interesting about skilled careers is, to your point around HVACs, plumbers, under your crawl space, those jobs are going to be there for quite some time, probably throughout most of our lives, in terms of you can still have a very long-term career. Whereas what's happening in white collar jobs, particularly paralegals, those that aren't, lawyers, even if you're a contract lawyer, I have good friends who are contract lawyers, are going, it's changing. It's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, all the way through to what's happening in coding and, in the tech space. There's a lot of those jobs that are going to be disrupted, probably destroyed. And how do you repurpose that workforce? So it's not just what's happening in, skilled careers or versus, more traditional white collar jobs. It's how are we looking at workforce development moving forward, right? So if you look at the BLS data, the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, they do a 10-year projection out. But if you actually look at that list, some of those jobs, you're like, those aren't going to be there in 5 to 10 years. So what are the jobs that are coming, right? We're just finding out what some of those jobs potentially are, right? If you look at things like mechatronics or robotics, there's going to be a huge explosion in that space in automation. Not because, you're going to have someone on the distribution center floor actually still doing the packing and picking. Those jobs are gone. Those are low paying jobs. But the service techs that are actually managing that for the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, like those are high paying jobs, because if those lines go down and those boxes don't get out the door to the customer that ordered it, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars a minute, if not an hour, right? And so you've got this real challenge of like, how do we see what's coming? Because some of those jobs that we typically think will be there, they might not be. But how do we project out to what's coming, what's disruption is happening, and then how do we get that workforce? Either we redeploy that workforce that's losing those jobs through destruction, or we set up that next generation of that workforce.
Yeah. I was listening to another podcast, Diary of the CEO, and he had the godfather of AI, and I forget his name offhand. And the trailer started off, the host said, well, what do we do? AI is going to disrupt white collar jobs. And he said, become a plumber. That was like the first part of the podcast. And it's true that, and I'm having this conversation with my kids. So my daughter is 8, my son is 11. And I remember having in one of my CEO groups, a technologist came and he was talking about AI. And I said, okay, what am I going to tell my kids? What am I going to do? And he was like, well, maybe they can, learn. He did say something about trades. He did say something, but he kind of said well, maybe not that. But he was also confused and he really couldn't give a solid answer to me. So there is an unknown. There's that big question mark out there of, okay, we knew that either you went into a trade, you went to college, right? You had a path. Now the path is a lot different.
It's a lot murkier. It's definitely a lot murkier for four-year degrees, unless you're in STEM, right? And look, we can have that conversation at length. I mean, if you look at the Federal Reserve data around the value of what used to be just a BA, when I was coming out of school with a bachelor's, there was still a lot of ROI in that investment, right? Particularly if you were in a harder science or in a STEM type program. Now it's moved to PhD level. Right. So in the, again, not to date myself, but let's just say 25 years time, the value of my BA has been completely pulled out. So it's now, if you're not in a STEM type bachelor's, master's, PhD program, the investment you put into college isn't paying off for a lot of people. And so I think when people ask that question, and just go back to somewhat the technologists couldn't answer, right? There's still this stigma around these blue collar jobs. And I think part of our work at the Skilled Careers Coalition is really pushing back on that and saying, actually, no, that's not true. The jobs that you thought were happening on the factory floor in the 1950s or 60s in Detroit with, what your dad used to do for 40 years, that's not what this is anymore, right? There's this massive opportunity that's out there. So part of our work through Skills Jam and working with the Jambassadors we have through the Skilled Careers Coalition is to just push back on that stigma and show young students what's possible and that there is a third option for them. The hardest part, and we did a bunch of research around this, is convincing their parents and their advisors and those that influence them, right? So they have that mindset of, well, these are old school jobs and, they're dirty, dark, dangerous jobs. That's not the actual reality. So it's not just talking to young students and convincing them. I think they're much more open to it. It's also making sure that when they are, or we are talking to their parents or advisors or their counselors, that there's an open aperture with those conversations as well, right? That there's something else out there that you should be considering for your student, whether it's your 8-year-old or my 11-year-old.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I just want to touch on college for a quick second. So I graduated in 2000. Everybody can do the math there, right? And I went to school for 4 years and I was a programmer. I was doing C++ stuff, like programs, like complete waste of time. I was taking advanced calculus, completely lost. One into business administration, minored in finance, one into IT, then I went into selling industrial supplies to people in the trades because of the 9/11 event. And I always say this, I came out of school more lost out of school than I was in school. And a lot of these kids, they go because they think that their parents are pushing them to go. My parents never said, like, look at the trades. It was just go to college. But a lot of these kids are just kind of going through college, coming out. What's the return on investment, especially today where a lot of these, careers don't need degrees, that you can learn a trade. You can not tack on the extra debt for college, and you learn and you earn in an apprenticeship. I mean, what's not to love?
Yeah. Well, and you're applying your skill. I look, I think the way we look at the opportunity exists, and we look at it from this perspective of opening up the aperture, right? So there are still students that we need going through 4-year degrees. There's still people we need in engineering, right?
I don't want my doctor learning on YouTube.
No, you don't want, exactly. You don't want your doctor learning on YouTube. So there's still, when we think about it from a workforce development perspective, there's still people we need to be moving through that funnel, right? But we also, because we've not done a great job, and in a lot of cases we've underfunded CTE programming in America, we haven't really created a rich trade environment, right? If you look at places like Germany, if you look at places like Australia, they have a rich trade environment. It's considered, a career.
Yes.
So why, we've got to make sure that we're rebalancing, right? Alongside the military is struggling with recruitment. 4-year degrees are struggling with recruitment. I think the 4-year degrees one that's challenged by things like AI and some of those jobs we were talking about. But there's recruitment challenges across all 3 spectrums. And so we need to look at the population of students that are coming up, those that are trying to re-job, those that are coming out of the military, those that are coming out of the prison system, say, hey, how do we do a better job of finding right person, right role? And how do we get them into the place that leverages what they're interested in? It might be something in a 4-year degree. They might be predisposed to engineering and math and calculus, which I was not, much like yourself, where I was like, this is not for me. And finding a way to do a better job of seeing students when they're younger, seeing what their aptitudes are and what they're passionate about, and helping direct them into those opportunities, as opposed to saying, well, everyone's got to go down this path, or you've got this path, but there's no middle way.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, why I think the trades have come a long way is social media. Years ago, you thought of a welder or a plumber. You just thought of just like an old factory, or you looked at, a plumber was plumber's butt. That's what people assumed. And I think over the last few years that you see these influencers out there, especially even women, only make up about 3 or 4% of tradespeople in the trades. And you look at the day in the life of a plumber, a day in the life of a welder, a day in the life of an electrician, and these kids are getting interested versus what they pre-perceived and what their parents told them. You're doing this at Skills Jam, right? You're telling stories, right, about these individuals. Tell us a little bit about Skills Jam and its mission and what it's looking to do.
Sure. And I think just to pick up on that point around social media, just for the audience, I spent 11 years in men and boys mental health at a global level with Movember, and I've seen the dark side of that. As much as the light side of what we're trying to do with Skills Jam. And quite frankly, Movember was very much leaning into finding the positive that could come from social media, because I do think it can do some good. I do think we need to be aware of what it can do in terms of the harm it creates. That's for sure, and there's plenty of evidence around that. However, it's not going away. It is how you market if you're a plumber now. And I think the point that we try to make is storytelling, right? Storytelling about and showing the visual of of what you're doing and the physicality of using your hands to fix something, you know, as a plumber or as an electrician, those are incredibly visual cues to someone going, oh, that's really cool. As opposed to just listening to it, you're actually seeing them doing it as they're talking about it. And in a lot of cases, it's explanatory and it's got some passion behind it because you can tell the person is happy with what they're doing. So a lot of our work in Skills Jam, whether it's young students through the Jam Ambassador program that we use, which is, let's be honest, I'm not the person to be talking to someone about a skill career because I don't have one. I didn't grow up with one. I'm also of a certain age. So when they look at me like, who's the old guy with the gray hair? But having a peer or a near peer talk to them about what they're doing and showing them the visual of that through storytelling is incredibly compelling. It's authentic and it's someone that looks like me or talks like me. So I think social media, while it's not going away, it's how do you find the ways to leverage it for good? The last point I'll make is everyone's talking about this tool belt generation. The reality is how you market your skills and your wares as an entrepreneur, or how you show up as a plumber in your local community, and the ability to actually market into that community to say, I'm the guy or girl down the street that does a great job of this stuff. Look at my product. That's happening all on social media. So it's the way you market to your customer base even is changing. And social media is one of those pathways through, which is why you're seeing a lot of these STEM type feeds show up on TikTok or on YouTube. It's because people are realizing that that's a way to market to the potential customer as well.
You need to be a brand ambassador in your own company. And I tell this to a lot of smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, like if you're not out there, right, you're invisible. And especially with ChatGPT and people going to ChatGPT and typing in who's the best plumber, who's the best electrician. Obviously, the last 20 years, you would pay for that in Google, but you can't do that anymore. It's losing traction. So even if you're uncomfortable being on video, so if you're running a plumbing business, and I see this a lot on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, somebody is filming exactly what they're doing, and then it's just, they're talking over the video. And that's one way to kind of get on video to showcase what you're doing, because it can attract a younger person who's interested, and maybe they'll go to your company over another company because you're bringing to light what you do day to day. And also that you're actually on social media as well. Social media, like that's a whole nother podcast.
Sure.
From a sense of like the good and the bad. But I think from the good standpoint, like it's a staple, like you have to be on social media. And I like the fact what you're doing at Skills Jam, that, like you said, like a Paige Knowles or Plumber Page, being an ambassador, and, that generation can relate to her and what she's doing in plumbing and HVAC and things like that. It's making a huge difference and a huge impact out there.
Yeah, it is. And some of us remember Yellow Pages, right? That's how you used to advertise your plumbing wares or your carpentry work. Those don't exist. And so you have to kind of move with what's happening. And again, I think the opportunity that's presented with Skills Jam and those influencers are out there having these conversations, I know you spend time on those channels yourself, is it gives people more context and color to what's happening, right? Whereas the Yellow Pages is a very binary, I need to call this person. I have no idea if this person's a great plumber or not. I'm about to find out, right? There wasn't even Yelp to refer to someone to say, this person's a really good plumber, right? There wasn't Angie. All those things didn't exist. And it's progressed over time now to where you can find out if someone's, quite capable of what they're doing in your backyard, or someone to your point, in an organization showing what's possible. I mean, the opportunity to leverage social media for companies when you have young talent who's excited about what they're doing, showing off what they're doing. I mean, that's a recruitment tool. They no longer go to websites. So let's be clear, if you're creating a monolithic website that has all your jobs, among young people, they don't spend any time on the website. We have a website for skillcareers.org, which is our overarching organization, but all of our Skills Jam material is social based.
You got to go where your market is.
Exactly right.
Right. Our market is scrolling, and it's just, you're on that video, and then 1 second later you're on the next video and next video. And how can you make the biggest impact within that first 1 to 2 seconds?
You have to go where they're spending their time.
You have to. And sometimes it might not be the right the place you want to be, but you have to go where the market is. I see individuals out there really teaching trades. Like there's a plumber by the name of Roger Wakefield out there who has a big social media following on YouTube, but he's teaching plumbing, teaching you how to run a business. Like you didn't get that before, right? What if you don't know anybody? If you want to be in the trades, and I find this, and I'd like to get your feedback on this, career exploration into the trades, I feel is difficult because if schools are pushing college and you're sitting down with your guidance counselor, and your guidance counselor saying what college you want to go to, but this person has a technical spark, their mechanical ability, where are they going to get their information if they don't have anybody in their family or friends that are in the trades?
Yeah. So we work with the American School Council Association. They're one of our strategic partners, like SkillsUSA and amongst others, in the B2B space. And I think again, it comes back to this: the way we're approaching the exploration that these students are going through, whether it's a 4-year degree or the military or otherwise. Military has a great recruitment platform, right? You can kind of see the opportunity, and they've invested heavily in showing what that opportunity is. The same in college in the general sense. If you look at how much they're spending per year, right? Military spends about $1.3, $1.5 billion to solve for those welder jobs that they have to get into the submarine, into the submarine bases to build the submarines of the future. And the colleges and universities spending about $1.5 to $2 billion a year. I would argue that we're probably spending that in skilled careers and skilled trades across the board, but it's very disaggregated and it's not joined up. There's not a central theme that comes through. So when we look at Skills Jam, it's like, what's our call to action? Where do we send these young students? Okay, they're interested. They're in discovery mode. Okay, well, how do we start? The algorithms can do a great job of this, but they're just feeding them more content and not getting them further down that path. And when you end up in a school environment, oftentimes it's a hard copy, right? There's not a soft copy version of, well, I'm interested in becoming a plumber. Like, what are my options here? And they just have a very tactile hard copy version of what's available. That's not their fault. It's just, we have to reimagine, how do we move that student further down that pathway and give them more exploration about what's possible, and then say, here's what in your local community, right? And we do have the tools to do this with the advent of AI and what's out there in terms of search. Like, how do we do a better job of saying, I'm interested in this pathway. What does it take for me to get down that pathway into a trade school? Because I want to explore plumbing. I want to actually go after that and check it out. How do we do a better job of getting them to that point to make a decision, right? This is marketing 101. It's awareness, consideration, purchase. So Skills Jam is the awareness end, right? All the people who are out on TikTok or YouTube are the awareness end of showing them what's possible. We're not really joined up on the consideration point. I'm really interested in this. I want to go down this pathway, to then I'm applying and I'm now in a plumbing program at a local trade school. That's the part that we got to figure out. So alongside destigmatizing the trades, showing what's possible, is our other main focus is how do we fix that placement recruitment ecosystem, right? How do we do a better job of streamlining that? So when someone's on that journey of discovery into exploration, into decision-making and taking action, that there's just signposts along that way.
Yeah. I think also mentorship helps, like
100%.
Being able to, get next to somebody who's been in the industry for 20, 30 years, who's successful, maybe they own their own business. I always believe in having community, building community, and having these individuals, can speak to other people along their journey. When you kind of get lost in the mix, you don't have clarity, and it's like you said, it's murky. Then you kind of got, you retreat and you're like, okay, maybe this is not for me. So you want to give them the tools. Like, I like the fact that you said that the social media, it's the awareness. Now you need to send them somewhere. So either you send them to a community, mentorship of some sort, and getting them around individuals. Yes, they can go to trade school if that's what they want to do, or if they want to apply to apprenticeship, or if they want to go into union. And it's the thing, like, there's so much information out there, but it's too much information. It's almost like, I don't really know what to do.
It's too much. It's disaggregated too. And I think to your point around, mentorships, like on the other side, and I'm sure you've looked at this too, on the other end of the spectrum, you have, what people are calling silver tsunami. You have people retiring. There's not that replacement rate that we want to see. we're also losing a ton of knowledge in that. And you talk to SkillsUSA, you talk to other CTSOs that are in the space of technical education, and they're struggling to get advisors and mentors back into teachers, back into the schools to teach them that 30 years and 40 years of knowledge. Like, I've run my own business. I've been a general contractor, I've been in mechatronics at large organizations, getting them to come back, right? And that same idea of mentorship is we talk a lot about this in that sort of ecosystem of, knowledge translation. How do we translate knowledge between generations? How do we find those pathways that not only is it going up, right? So how do I teach an older person that might be managing me as to how I want to be engaged on the job site, through to what can I learn from someone who's been doing this for 30 to 40 years? So there's a real opportunity in the middle there around mentorship, whether it's apprenticeships or going through the union or going through trade school. But there's a unique challenge with, we're losing all of this knowledge and all this talent. How do we find a way to tap into that and bring that back in, right? So if there are people listening to this that are, looking at sort of, going off into the sunset and, enjoying time on their boat, like, find a way to give back to your local community.
Pay it forward.
And pay it forward.
Pay it
exactly
forward. I think
right.
that's really what it's about. Tell us a little bit about the coalition and how that is bringing you together along with Skills Gem.
So we're a Big Tent organization. So, in philanthropy, there's this concept called collective impact. Collective impact is basically, as I was, mentioning, the idea behind the, recruitment placement ecosystem. It's disaggregated. Collective impact is the idea of, like, we're all trying to solve the same problem. So I'll use cancer as an example, because that's the space I worked in. And everyone was investing in cancer research. And what you've seen over the last 15 years is everyone's like, well, wait a minute. A lot of the modalities, a lot of the chemistry behind these different types of cancers, whether they're male or female cancers, particularly urogenital cancers, they all have the same markers. They have the same baseline. But we're investing over here. You're investing over there. Maybe we should pool our idea and resource to move further faster. And that's really what collective impact is. Like, how do we come together and say, hey, we've got a problem here. Let's solve for it collectively because we can get there faster. We know we have a skilled trades gap, right? How do we bring into a bigger tent coalition? And the nice thing about skilled careers, skilled trades, is it's a purple issue. We need government involved. We need them to be looking at it from the top down and saying, how do we reinvest in these opportunities? How do we find these pathways for these young students to just open up the aperture and explore what's possible for them? All the way through to the business side, all the way through to other CTSOs, educators in that space, and saying, look, collectively, and we know everyone's not going to come to that table. That's okay. But those that do and see the possibility of moving further faster is those we want to engage. So, whether it's TikTok, which is one of our partners, to SkillsUSA, which is one of our partners, to Warner Brothers Discovery, which is a partner, the Material Handling Institute, which oversees all mechatronics and all the suppliers and producers of mechatronics, so robotics, automated systems in warehouses, et cetera. They're all coming together saying, hey, we have a problem in our space. We've got an issue with automation and having the techs to manage that automation, or we've got an issue in carpentry, or we've got an issue in diesel techs. How do we try to solve that problem together? Because if we can sort of look back and say, we want to get right person, right role, not all of these students are going to be coming to me, but they're going to be available to others that are in the space trying to solve for the same problem.
Yeah. I think if we can try to solve the old stigmas, which a lot of us are, right, online, I think, but I think it is the administration that's going to have to be the one to help with this. Yes, there's a lot of different foundations. My foundation, STAC, Skilled Trades Advisory Council, we're working, our mission is to recruit, retain, and advocate, right? And your coalition, everybody's kind of doing their part. And we'll see what happens in the administration and the big, beautiful bill that Trump is doing with the apprenticeships, and hopefully there's money that will funnel through there. But hopefully we'll get to a place where, like other countries, it's respected. Like, it's okay if you're a plumber. That's totally cool. You want to work with your hands? That's totally cool. If people want to find out more about you, Skills Jam, the coalition, where do they go?
So if you want to understand the organization, the Skilled Careers Coalition, just go to skilledcareers.org. That'll talk a little bit more about the high level of what we see, what we're doing around those two issues, destigmatizing, and then how do we fix that workforce development, that recruitment placement ecosystem? How do we work together on that? And it gives a little bit more of the math behind, what do we see as the opportunity with this fairly large population of people that we could be tapping into? And again, pushing them or moving them into pathways that work best for them and what we need, not just moving them down one or two pathways. So skillcareers.org is where you can go to understand a lot of stuff that I talk about. But as I said, I'm the old guy in the room, right? That's the conversation I'm having. If you want to understand what we're doing with Skills Jam and that peer-to-peer, that by youth, for youth content, you go to YouTube, you go to Instagram, and you go to TikTok. And you look at Skills Jam and you'll see what we're doing. So longer form content, 15, 20 minutes. We've engaged Ty Pennington for the second year here at SkillsUSA. He does a whole Champions League series with us. And that's very purposeful because Ty understands I've been doing this for a long time. I've done a lot of cool stuff. And I've also been on TV, but man, I can always fall back on working with my hands. And having him in that conversation with these younger students and showing that intergenerational knowledge transfer is some of the things we're picking up on YouTube and some of the shorts we're putting out on TikTok. But probably the most important thing that we're doing is tapping into that zeitgeist around young students and the passion they have. So when you look at Instagram and TikTok in particular, because they're shorter form content, a lot of our content from our Jam ambassadors is living there. And these are students that are across the board, right? They're not just what you consider the traditional trades. They're across the board in terms of all these different types of trades and talking about what they're doing. And again, giving you that storytelling layer and that visual layer that is very different from what you typically see.
Yeah. And, I've seen it, and you're making an impact across the board by giving these kids the ability to share their stories, to bring other kids together with them to share their stories. And I think it's all about a combined effort. Again, we're all doing different things, but overall, we want the same things. So definitely check that out. Mark, it's been a blast having you on the show.
Thank you
very much.
I appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.